At 7:34 on April 18, 1943, the engines came alive on Henderson Field, Guadalcanal. Captain Thomas G. Lanphier, Jr. sat strapped inside the cockpit of a Lockheed P-38G Lightning, tail number 432,204. He was 26 years old, combat pilot with limited hours over enemy territory. Ahead of him stretched more than 400 miles of open ocean. No landmarks, no rescue, no margin. The cockpit smelled of oil and hot metal. The twin Allison V 1710 engine settled into a steady roar at 2,300 RPM. Fuel gauges read full. External drop tanks hung beneath the wings, thin aluminum cylinders holding 330 gallons combined. Without them, the mission would be impossible. With them, it was still reckless. At 7:36, the first P-38 rolled forward. By 7:45, 18 fighters were airborne, climbing in silence. Radios stayed dark. Orders were explicit. No transmissions, no deviations, no aborts. Somewhere far to the northwest, over Bougainville Island, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto was already in the air. Lanphier did not know the exact man he was hunting. He only knew the time, the route, the altitude, the consequence of failure. If they were late by even 2 minutes, the target would be gone. If they climbed too high, fuel would run dry before their return. If a single engine failed, the Pacific would take the aircraft within seconds. The mission was already unfolding, and it never should have been approved. The larger situation had reached a breaking point by mid-April 1943. For 4 months, the air war over the Solomon Islands had been grinding forward without pause. Since January, Allied aircraft had flown over 3,200 sorties from Guadalcanal alone.
Oh.
Losses were steady. On average, 1 aircraft failed to return for every 25 missions. Pilots vanished into jungle or sea. Wreckage rarely recovered. Japanese air raids continued almost daily. Over the previous 90 days, more than 400 alerts had been logged on Guadalcanal. Bombers struck Henderson Field repeatedly. Fuel dumps burned, runways cratered. Every repair crew worked under the expectation of another strike before dusk. At the center of Japanese naval power stood Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, Commander-in-Chief of the Combined Fleet, architect of Pearl Harbor, the most experienced naval strategist Japan possessed. American intelligence intercepted a coded Japanese naval message on April 14th. The message detailed Yamamoto's inspection tour of forward bases, exact dates, exact times, craft type escort numbers, altitudes, routes. It was a rare gift, and a dangerous one. The flight plan stated that Yamamoto would depart Rabaul at 6 o'clock on April 18th aboard a Mitsubishi G4M Model 11 bomber, codenamed Betty by Allied forces. He would fly at 6,500 feet, speed estimated at 180 miles per hour. 2 bombers, 6 A-6M0 fighters as escort. The Americans did the math immediately. Distance from Guadalcanal to the intercept point near Bougainville was approximately 435 miles one way. Total round-trip distance exceeded 870 miles. The P-38G had a maximum internal fuel range of roughly 450 miles. Even with drop tanks, cruise margins would be razor-thin. Failure would mean not just losing pilots, it would mean revealing to Japan that their codes were compromised. Intelligence officers warned that if the mission failed, all future intercepts might be lost. The stakes extended beyond a single man. If Yamamoto survived, Japanese morale remained intact. If he was killed, the psychological blow could ripple across the Pacific. Command continuity would fracture. Operational confidence would falter. President Roosevelt approved the mission personally. Admiral Chester Nimitz issued the order with restrictions. No survivors, no evidence, no acknowledgement. The operation was codenamed Vengeance. Mathematics were brutal. To arrive at the intercept point at exactly 9:35. The P-38s would need to maintain an average ground speed of 230 miles per hour while flying at wave-top altitude. For the first 400 miles to avoid radar detection, at that height, fuel consumption increased by nearly 15%. Each P-38 carried approximately 410 gallons internally. The external tanks added 165 gallons each, Total fuel at takeoff reached roughly 740 gallons. At cruise, the Allison engines burned about 120 gallons per hour combined. At combat power, consumption spiked sharply. There would be no loiter time. There would be no second pass. If a pilot missed the intercept window, there would be no fuel to search. Navigation added another layer of risk. The route required dead reckoning over featureless ocean. A heading error of just 1 degree would place the formation nearly 8 miles off course after 450 miles. At that distance, visual acquisition would be unlikely. The Escort Zero fighters outnumbered the P-38s at the point of contact. The G-4M bomber itself carried multiple defensive guns and had a reputation for absorbing punishment before failing catastrophically. Return calculations were worse. After combat, pilots would jettison drop tanks to reduce drag. Internal fuel remaining would be estimated, not measured precisely. Any miscalculation would end with ditching. One engine failure meant instant loss of altitude. At low fuel, the aircraft would not climb back. Even under perfect conditions, success probabilities were slim, yet one factor changed everything. The Lockheed P-38G Lightning was unlike anything the Japanese had faced at long range. Twin engines, twin booms, central cockpit, designed for speed and altitude. Powered by 2 Allison V1710 engines producing 1,325 horsepower each, wingspan measured 52 feet. Maximum speed exceeded 400 miles per hour at altitude. Combat ceiling reached 44,000 feet. Armament concentrated in the nose, eliminated convergence issues. One 20mm Hispano cannon with 150 rounds. 4.50 caliber Browning machine guns with 500 rounds per gun. At typical engagement ranges, a 2-second burst delivered over 40 pounds of metal directly forward. Fuel capacity defined the mission. The P-38 was one of the few Allied fighters capable of accepting large external tanks without severe performance penalties. The drop tanks were simple, thin aluminum shells, gravity-fed, designed to be discarded instantly with a cockpit switch. At cruise, pilots leaned the mixture aggressively. Propellers set to low RPM, manifold pressure reduced. Every gallon mattered. The Japanese underestimated the aircraft's reach. They believed Allied fighters could not escort bombers or conduct intercepts beyond 300 miles. Their confidence came from experience. Most Allied fighters simply could not make the distance. Yamamoto's schedule assumed safety through geography. The Americans understood something else. The intercepted message gave not just location, but time discipline. Yamamoto was punctual, obsessively so. His itinerary allowed no deviation. That rigidity became the vulnerability. Lanfear and the others were briefed in absolute secrecy. They were told only that the target was a high-ranking officer. They were shown the map, the headings, the times. At 7:34, as Lanfear lifted off, he felt the weight of it.
Ow!
There would be no radio chatter, no heroics, no improvisation. Fly low, fly silent, hit hard, turn home. If everything worked, the enemy would never know how it happened. If anything failed, no one would ever speak of it again. Before we continue, take a moment to support the channel. These stories survive because people choose to keep them alive. If you value historically accurate, deeply researched World War II documentaries, like the video and subscribe. It tells the algorithm that this history still matters, that the details matter, that the people behind the numbers mattered. Now back to Lanfear. At 7:50, the formation leveled off at less than 50 feet above the Pacific. The coastline of Guadalcanal faded behind them. Ahead lay open water, and a rendezvous with history that depended on minutes, gallons, and absolute precision. At 8 o'clock, the formation crossed the final visual reference point. After that, there was nothing but ocean. Altitude held at 50 feet, airspeed stabilized at 210 miles per hour. Engines leaned to the edge of roughness. Every pilot watched the fuel gauges more than the horizon. Spray from the Pacific flicked against the canopies. One mistake here would mean cartwheeling into the sea at over 300 feet per second. By 8:20, the first fuel check came silently, dropped tanks down by nearly 30 gallons each. The math still worked barely. At 8:35, Major John Mitchell, mission commander, adjusted heading 5 degrees north. Dead reckoning corrections. No landmarks, no radio. Just stopwatch compass and faith in the numbers. At 8:55, the formation climbed slightly to 200 feet to clear an approaching weather band. Clouds hung low. Visibility dropped to under 5 miles. Engines ran steady. Fuel burn increased again. At 9:10, Mitchell signaled the climb. P-38s pulled up sharply, climbing through 2,000 feet, then 4,000. Power increased to military settings. Drop tanks emptied rapidly now. The intercept window approached. At 9:18, altitude reached 6,000 feet. Speed increased to 260 miles per hour. The ocean fell away beneath them. Eyes strained forward. At 9:20, Mitchell gave the signal. Drop tanks released. 18 aluminum tanks fell away in unison, tumbling toward the sea. The aircraft surged forward as drag vanished. Internal fuel now stood at approximately 260 gallons per aircraft. Return range shrank instantly. At 9:24, the formation split. 4 aircraft climbed to 18,000 feet to act as top cover. 4 more remained high as backup. The remaining 10, including Lanfear and Lieutenant Rex Barber, descended slightly and spread into attack pairs. At 9:30, Mitchell checked his watch. They were on time. At 9:34, at a range of roughly 12 miles, Barber spotted glints ahead. Aircraft, low, 2 bombers, multiple escorts, heading confirmed. Northwest to southeast. Exactly as predicted. At 9:35, visual contact was undeniable. 2 Mitsubishi G4M Model 11 bombers flew in loose formation at approximately 6,500 feet. Each carried a crew of 7. Bomb load minimal for transport. Defensive armament included one 20mm cannon in the tail and multiple 7.7mm machine guns in dorsal and waist positions. 6 A6M0 fighters escorted them. Speed estimated at 190 miles per hour. Altitude varied between 7,000 and 9,000 feet. Mitchell broke radio silence. Bandits. Bandits. Attack. The sky erupted into motion. Lanfear pushed throttles forward to full power. Speed climbed past 320 miles per hour. He rolled left, climbing slightly to gain position above the escort. Barber stayed low. He targeted the lead bomber. At 9:36, the 0 escorts reacted. 2 peeled toward Lanfear's element. 4 stayed tight with the bombers. Lanfear rolled inverted and dove, using gravity to build speed. His P-38 screamed past 380 miles per hour. 0 pilot misjudged closure rate. The American fighter crossed his nose before he could fire. Lanfear pulled up hard, passing beneath the bomber formation. At 9:37, Barber was in position. Range closed from 600 yards to 300. Barber aligned the nose-mounted guns directly at the right engine of the lead G4M. He fired a 2-second burst. 4.50 caliber streams and a 20mm shell converged at once. The right engine erupted in flame. Fuel ignited instantly. The bomber rolled sharply to the right. Barber pulled up to avoid collision. The G4M lost altitude rapidly. At 9:38, it struck the jungle canopy of Bougainville and exploded. 1 bomber destroyed. Lanfear climbed aggressively, scanning for the second bomber. He spotted it banking hard left, descending slightly. A 0 crossed his path, firing a short burst. Tracers passed behind the tail boom. Lanfear rolled and dove again. At 9:39, he came in from above and ahead of the second bomber. Range closed to 200 yards. He fired a sustained burst lasting nearly 3 seconds. Rounds tore through the cockpit section. The bomber's nose disintegrated. Smoke poured from the fuselage. Control surfaces failed. The aircraft pitched down. At 9:40, it crashed into the sea, breaking apart on impact. Both bombers were down within 4 minutes. Fuel check. Lanfear had burned nearly 60 gallons since drop. Ammunition down by approximately 40%. But the fight was not over. The 0 escorts turned aggressive. At 9:41, 2 Zeros latched onto Barber's tail. He broke right, diving steeply. Speed reached 400 miles per hour. Zeros followed but began to compress. Their controls stiffened. Tracers flew wide. Barber leveled at 1,000 feet, then pulled up sharply. 1-0 overshot. Barber rolled and fired a short burst. The Zero's wing root shattered. The aircraft spun into the sea. At 9:43, Another Zero fired at Lanfear from high 6. Rounds struck the left boom. Minor damage, no fuel leak. Lanfear broke left and climbed. He used the P-38's superior dive and zoom capability. The Zero tried to follow but bled energy. At 9:44, Lanfear reversed and fired a 1-second burst at 250 yards. The Zero caught fire and dove away, trailing smoke. It did not recover. Remaining Zeros disengaged. At 9:46, Mitchell ordered withdrawal. Fuel remaining ranged between 160 and 190 gallons across the formation. Distance to Guadalcanal remained over 430 miles. There would be no margin. At 9:50, the P-38s descended again to wave top altitude. Engines leaned aggressively, speed reduced to 190 miles per hour to conserve fuel. The return flight was silent. By 10:30, fuel gauges dipped below half. Some pilots reported engine roughness. Oil temperatures climbed. The Pacific stretched endlessly ahead. At 11:40, the first aircraft reported fuel at 70 gallons. Another showed 60. Ditching calculations began mentally. At 12:05, Guadalcanal appeared on the horizon. 12:25, one P-38 flamed out on final approach and ditched offshore. Pilot survived. Lanfear touched down at 12:32. His gauges read just over 15 gallons remaining. The mission was complete. At 12:32 on April 18, 1943, Lanfear's wheels touched the pierced steel planking of Henderson Field. The left engine coughed as he throttled back. The right engine followed seconds later. When ground crews reached the aircraft, both fuel selectors were already dry. Later measurement would show that he landed with roughly 12 to 15 gallons total, less than 10 minutes of flight time at minimum power. For several pilots, the margin had been even thinner. One P-38 never reached the runway. Lieutenant Raymond Hine ran out of fuel 10 miles short of Guadalcanal and ditched into the sea at approximately 12:20. He was not recovered. His aircraft sank within seconds. The return had been as lethal as the intercept. Within an hour, intelligence officers sealed the airfield briefing room. Pilots were separated. Statements were taken individually. Watches were checked against logs. Gun camera film was collected immediately. By 14 o'clock, the first confirmations began. Reconnaissance later that day located the wreckage of the first G-4M bomber in the Bougainville jungle. Burn pattern confirmed an in-flight engine fire, followed by ground impact. The second bomber wreck was found offshore. Debris field and survivor reports confirmed a catastrophic mid-air breakup. Japanese radio traffic changed within hours. By April 19th, Tokyo announced that Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto had been killed in an aircraft accident during an inspection tour. No details were provided, no enemy losses were acknowledged. American command logged the mission result as a success. 2 Mitsubishi G-4M Model 11 bombers destroyed. At least 3 A-6M0 fighters destroyed or damaged beyond recovery. 1 American aircraft lost, an American pilot killed. The mission stood as one of the longest fighter interceptions of the war. Total flight time exceeded 6 hours. Total distance flown approached 900 miles. Within the squadron, claims were reviewed carefully. Credit for the bomber carrying Yamamoto became contested and would remain debated for decades. Official records eventually credited Lieutenant Rex Barber with the confirmed shootdown of the lead bomber. Lanfear received credit for the second. The distinction mattered less than the outcome. Japan had lost its most experienced naval commander in a single morning. The strategic impact unfolded quietly but decisively. Yamamoto had been the central coordinating force behind Japanese naval aviation. He understood American industrial capacity better than most of his peers. He had argued against prolonged war. His death removed a moderating voice within Japanese high command. Operational efficiency suffered almost immediately. Japanese combined fleet planning slowed. Coordination between carrier aviation and land-based air units fractured. Within 6 months, Japanese naval air losses increased sharply due to poorer doctrine and slower adaptation. In the Solomon Islands, Allied airfields experienced fewer coordinated strikes. Loss rates among Japanese bomber formations increased as escort discipline degraded. American intelligence estimated that over the next year, hundreds of Allied aircrew lives were indirectly saved through reduced effectiveness of Japanese air operations. The Guadalcanal campaign stabilized. Supply lines strengthened. Henderson Field remained operational without prolonged closure. One mission shifted the balance of confidence. After the war, Lanfear left active service. He returned to civilian life, working in aviation and business. He remained outspoken about the mission, defending his account until his death in 1987. Barber lived quietly for decades, avoiding publicity. He rarely spoke of the intercept. When asked, he emphasized teamwork and planning over individual credit. The P-38 Lightning continued to serve throughout the war. Its long-range interception capability influenced escort doctrine in Europe and the Pacific. Later fighters adopted similar concepts. Drop tanks became standard. Fuel management became tactical planning, not logistics. The aircraft retired shortly after the war, replaced by jet fighters with even greater reach. But the lesson endured. Precision mattered more than numbers. Information mattered more than firepower. Time mattered more than courage. On April 18, 1943, history balanced on a narrow edge measured in minutes and gallons. If the formation had launched 5 minutes later, the intercept would have failed. If fuel burn had increased by 10%, none would have returned. If Yamamoto had delayed his schedule by even a quarter hour, the Pacific War would have taken a different shape. This story survived because it succeeded exactly once, because a handful of pilots trusted calculations that said they should not. If you are watching from the United States, from Japan, from Europe, or anywhere this history still echoes, thank you for being here. If this documentary added clarity, accuracy, and respect to a moment that shaped the war, like the video and subscribe, share where you are watching from. These stories endure only when people choose to remember them. You are not just watching history, you're keeping it alive.